Hello everybody from Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, where we gather to meet for the third Finance in Common Summit that puts all the public development banks in the world together, and also civil society organization and also private sector representatives. So it's a great event that takes place here. I'm going to go to pass the floor immediately to Tatiana and Francisco for them to explain their project.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. And I'm happy to be here, happy to be part of this event and learn from the different institutions that are present. And something I will talk about is our project, which is securing our future, where in this project with Debating Africa and also Debating Europe, we give the floor to 100 young people from Africa and also from Europe to express themselves about what they think are the key challenges they are facing at this time where we have the COVID pandemic and also the Ukraine war. And something that was quite interesting in that, I mean, the specific focus group where I participated is that young people, they are all concerned about climate change. But also they are concerned about other specific aspects of the climate change, for example. Let's say, for example, African young people, they are more concerned about the things that come after climate change, maybe food insecurity, because they are relying on agriculture and there is no industrialization in the agriculture sector in most of the African countries, for example. So we have food insecurity, but we also have conflict, war, also crime, kidnapping, especially for those people living in conflictual areas and so on. So these are the main challenges we discuss about in my focus group. And I think Francisco also participated in one focus group from Debating Europe. I think he will give more points or more action about what they discuss about it.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Mr. President, for the invitation. Going beyond a little bit these issues that are a bit more thematic or related to a theme, which are, of course, climate change is really one of the biggest ones, but as well food insecurity and the energy crisis. In my focus group, and I know many participants from my focus groups were also thinking about more structural issues as the lack of long-termism, and long-termism specifically in things like development and also in tackling climate change, because we know that climate change is an issue, it's the #1 global threat, that is really gonna take a long time for us to deal with this. This is a long-term threat by on itself. So we were thinking in my focus group, how do we deal with this? And I think it's so relevant to mention here at the Finance in Common Summit, where there are different public development banks that have, some of them, as the EIB, have an approach which is perhaps based on the long-term tools and on tackling development. So that's one thing that really came up very, very often in our discussions. But then we also talk about the accountability of institutions that perhaps have a longer term approach, but unlike governments that have a couple of years, may not be democratically elected, which is also one thing to take into account.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, Francisco. I must say that I will say three things. One, I really think this is a great initiative that you have taken. For the Europeans, and especially for us at the European Investment Bank, Africa is a key continent. We are together, and to speak together, to get together, to sharing conclusions about approaches is exactly what we need to do to make sure that our two continents will continue to go together. And this is really important because the times are very challenging. My second observation is on the climate change, and actually bringing what both of you mentioned. Yes, climate change is the big challenge. It is a big challenge that we need to address in Europe. It is a big challenge that we need to address in Africa. I think the difference of perceptions probably comes to the fact that unfortunately in Africa, we see already much more the impact of climate change that has come than in Europe. That is called adaptation. And that's probably why you have this perception that, the impact of climate change is more important. But actually, I think it is generational. The younger generation is very much aware of the needs to change, the need to tackle quickly climate change, and that implies that there are behaviors to change. There are processes to try to move forward. There are heavy sectors in terms of emissions that we need to accompany for them to change the way they do business, and that is valid for for all of us. So from the corporates to the individuals like us, and it goes of course for institutions. And at EIB, we have, as you know, embarked on a journey that is targeting climate change as the key element. And the third thing I would say is in terms of governance. Yes, you are right, Francisco. We are long-term investors. And climate change is a long-term challenge. So it needs to put in place policies that are going to be long-term policies. Now, long-term policies does not mean that we have a lot of time to implement them. We need to start them now. Right. But it is true that that this long-term perspective is important also to make sure that we do the right things and in steps. Now, that does not mean that that we are out of control. Mm-hmm. We in our institutions, we have shareholders. The shareholders are the member states of the European Union. They give us instructions about the way to do business. But actually, the European Commission also is a very close partner to us. And they too are, I mean, the European Commission puts its responsibility in front of the European Parliament, for example. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that they don't have long-term policies. The 2050 climate neutrality target for Europe is a target that has been set by the European Commission. So I think it's good to have the combination of long-term policy goals that has to be implemented now already, and also accountability structures that gives the possibility for implementing these long-term policies, but also being responsible and being accountable to the people who have appointed us, basically. Mm-hmm.